Okay, we're late. I didn't actually realize we were late. And the reason I didn't realize we were late is chiefly that I just didn't I forgot how I'm doing time zones now, which is I'm occasionally just misdirecting with the time zones to slightly muddle in a way that probably doesn't effectively matter that much. Any attempts to ID track me. Let's turn that off for now. I don't think it'll make a difference, but I'm trying to talk in time zones that are not my own, at least sometimes. Oh, I meant to turn the YouTube stream's bitrate up slightly. Stream is a black screen here. Give me a sec. It shouldn't. I'm looking at it. Like, I'm watching it right now. It looks a little bit blurrier than I'd like, because again, I need to turn the bitrate up. But I can't. I don't know if I can even do that without. I'm not sure if I can even do that while the stream's actually running. Yeah, that's what I thought. I can. We're gonna... It's on my phone somewhere for food. Apparently it's being buggy. Maybe. Okay. Also, I just noticed the YouTube chat ain't displaying right. Give me a sec. This is a reasonably easy fix, so I can do it real quick. It just decided that it didn't want to save as fucking... I'll double check that for both my YouTube chats, because that's weird. Alright, and then other YouTube chat. Okay. Can you say something again? I need to check something. Hello? Hello? You say something again? Can you say something again? Oh. Sure. Sorry, I didn't. That was rude of me. It took a second. Okay. I just need to see how it showed up. It's cut off right now. That's fine. It's supposed to happen. Also, I know YouTube delay is really bad. Sorry. Huh. Really? Okay. That I don't know if I can immediately fix. I can disconnect my VPN, but I don't think that'd go very well. As long as you can hear me clearly, then it's all good. I will... There shouldn't be any delays built in. That would imply there's like a 30-40 second delay. That's really quite crazy. Okay. That's fine. Let me just say what I've got over. And you can't, I'm not going to get a chance to look at it. There might be things I could do, but I don't want to do it right now. Okay. Now... Okay, so I was giving some consideration to what I wanted to do here. Whether my, let me double check if there's any places to advertise. I haven't given full consideration. But I was giving some real thought. Okay, we're back. I had it fucking... Let's make sure the same link still works, because that's my real fucking fear now. It does. Okay, it fucking logged me out of YouTube and then crashed. If you're wondering what just happened there. Okay. Yep, we're back though. And luckily it should be on this. Is it on the same window? It should be on the same window. My old links still work at least. I just tested all that. Alright, awesome. Glad you see it. You're getting that much delay? Really? Like, how much of me sort of saying that it's back did you hear before you typed that? Or is it the immediately once you started getting stream again? I don't know why it's like why the chat widget isn't showing the most recent stuff until it's pushed up either it doesn't matter. Did you say it once took like 20-30 seconds for you to react? Okay. Don't like the media source. Let's move. Okay, I don't know if we're going to be getting better results for the YouTube chat. That's fine. Nevertheless, I will be paying close attention to it. So, as I was saying before that should happen, I was thinking about what concurrent viewer 0, what's happening? Might even be more. I didn't time it, but I'll actually do that for this. Okay. Well, Mark. Okay, so as I was saying, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do for my first sort of foray back into semi-educational content. And I was thinking, like, I could do another PowerPoint, but, and the PowerPoint was initially going to be on, I guess what you would call Neoplatonism, which is what I'm reading about right now. And that's, sort of where self-professed disciples of Plato took his thought in around the 3rd century CE. And so, I was sort of getting that ready, and I thought, and the idea of a reading stream came back to me, and I thought maybe we could read some of that material. But I realized there's just some foundational stuff we're missing for me to dive right into that, as I've been reading about it. So I figured, let's do something that's big, let's do something that's sort of normal, that's popular, even. I hope no one left just of all that, because we got apparently up to 6 views. So, and I thought, let's go right back to the source. So that would be, that gives a few options. And I just sort of in the last couple hours or so, because I realized I was going to need this, prepared this presentation. And to anyone who's familiar with the has a background with Plato, this is going to be very, very basic stuff. Popular things you're talking about, magic. Literally, I could think of at least 30 things on the top of my head that are more popular than that. I made stream elements just caught up to the fact I'm live on Twitch. I hope that's not affecting anything. Okay. This is going to seem like a lot of very boring review to anyone who knows them, anyone who knows the material especially well. But I feel like it's important to establish very basic ideas. So we'll briefly talk about Plato. Who are we talking about? A guy who was born in the Greek city of Athens, around about 428, 427 BCE, died 348 BCE. He's a student of Socrates, by which I mean he is one of a few people who sort of followed Socrates around and admired the guy. Socrates certainly did not think of himself as a teacher. He'd go on to develop his own ideas, and he founded the Academy at Athens, which is where that, like, word originates, the sort of term we use, for various institutions of education. So, Plato differed from his mentor in a number of ways. Socrates was known for being this kind of guy who just sort of hung around and would go up to people and sort of ask them questions about the things they believed. Just sort of one after another, challenging each new premise as they came up. And he didn't write anything. It's not terribly clear what he actually thought about things. He seemed mostly concerned with questions. And he seemed mostly concerned with matters of how to live well. What is it good? What does it mean to be a good person, right? To live the good life. Plato did write. He wrote in dialogues, chiefly from... Well, we'll get into it. He had to develop philosophy, or he had ultimately developed a philosophy, and he was concerned with ethical matters, but he was also concerned with everything. He was concerned with why there is anything, why sort of reality is, I suppose. So, all of his dialogues used his mentor Socrates, who was killed, who was ultimately tried and executed by the city of Athens for, quote, corrupting the youth. And I think I should have noted in the PowerPoint, but which had a pretty pronounced development on the development of Platonic idea of Plato's ideas. He expresses a lot of skepticism towards democracy, for one, and that was a big result of this. But all of his dialogues were written from the perspective of his late mentor Socrates. And there's sort of a general consensus that you can divvy them up by era. His early dialogues, often called the Socratic dialogues or the Aporetic dialogues, deal mostly with Socrates doing things we recognize as authentic to how he behaved. He mostly asks questions. The conclusions of the dialogue are left very open-ended, and it ends with the person he's talking to in a state of total confusion, doesn't know what's up or down. We might call aporia, hence the name Aporetic. In the middle dialogues, Plato begins to use Socrates as a mouthpiece for more complex ideas of his own. And then later dialogues, we see some of those ideas from the middle dialogues being challenged. I think, but I don't know if it's broadly considered, if it's like there's like consensus that it's a later dialogue. The Parmenides is a big example of this. These ideas are challenged and tested, new ideas and subjects put forward. Oh. We have the chat here, though. It's still a little bit delayed. You know, there's actually possibly an easy fix to this. Although Stream Elements wants me to log in again, which I don't want to do. That's fine. They'll appear over time, and I'll address them as they come up. So, primary Platonic idea we're going to quickly discuss here, because it's something that's established throughout the middle dialogues. Have I just gone down again? No, I haven't. Okay. Something was looking a little odd on my end. Okay, but it's fine. So this idea of forms, of this is where the term Platonic ideal comes from. How do we define like these sort of abstract things like goodness, like beauty? And his answer is that good things like this exist. There is a one thing that is beauty. There is a one thing that is life, whatever, what have you. There's a decent number of them that are elaborated in various dialogues. Beauty isn't primarily a symposium, for example. There is a thing that is beauty on some level, but it exists in a place that is it exists in a way that is not perceptible to normal human sense. We can only sort of see things that are kind of like it, that get to varying degrees. We describe them as more or less beautiful by how close they are to it. And on the subject of goodness, he very briefly mentions in the Republic, just sort of offhandedly, that yeah, and the form of goodness might be even higher, and then he doesn't elaborate on that, and that is one of the most influential statements in all of existence. Christianity does not look anything like we know it without him saying that. For just one example. Someone tried to do the AI thing. A bot I hit on the Twitch side. Mathematics, geometry, expressions like that do get you a little bit closer. Again, this is elaborated on in the Republic a little bit. And ultimately, in the later years of the Academy at Athens, this is hundreds and hundreds of years after Plato lived, so who knows how much it applies to him. There was, like a plaque placed on the archway leading to the Academy that's like, let no one enter here who does not know geometry. Get on bias. And we have to briefly talk about this, though it's a very, very thorny subject. The, so-called Agrapha Dogmata. I'm going to turn the music down another notch. The Graphic Dogmata refers to the idea of the hidden of the sort of secret teachings of Plato, the hidden ideas that are not present in the dialogues, or if they are, they're hidden. If they are, they're encoded. There is some evidence for this. This idea that Plato had things he did not put in the stuff he wrote, because we have just about everything he wrote. We're very fortunate in that way. There is some evidence for this. Aristotle, his student of about 30 years, he did ultimately have a falling out with Aristotle, but Aristotle would start his own school, the Lyceum, but Aristotle does occasionally allude to the hidden teachings, or he calls them the so-called hidden teachings, which many read sarcastically. But, and I know, I think he's probably not being sarcastic. I don't really see the motive. Like, I don't... Given the time he was in when stuff would have been more known, I don't think he would have gotten away with lying about it. At least not too many audiences. There's, an anecdote from one of Aristotle's students that he, sort of transmits from Aristotle about, the lecture on the good, where Plato was going to give a public lecture about, like, the nature of good, for anyone could sit in on, and everyone came, of course, and the audience were incredibly baffled as he began to rail off a bunch of shit about math and geometry and astrology, and people began to very slowly file out. And it's not, and we don't really see this idea expressed as strongly as that would imply in the dialogue, in the material of the dialogues. So there's that. And then finally there's the general Platonic skepticism towards writing, which he inherits from Aristotle. Not Aristotle, but Socrates. Unlike Socrates, he does write, but he seems actively contemptuous of writing. Like not like, oh, well, writing's okay, but, the written word is better. Like, it's like something he's obligated to reduce himself to, right? And that raises a question, like, of, okay, so I was just messing with the setting there. That raises a question of what did he, like, if he feels this way, that writing is this sort of contemptuous thing, what doesn't he feel is, like, what does he feel is too good for it? There's a little bit of a footnote here, which is that while this is present in various dialogue, as in, like, the Phaedrus, right? There is, some of his like strongest, most stringent objections to writing are in the seventh letter, and the seventh letter is disputed. There are some who think he did not in fact write it. So there is that, though again, it is not the only time he sort of floats this idea. But what is actually what does the Graphic Dogmata actually refer to? This is important. We can't really know, but there's certain ideas among the Timaeus school, and others, that it's this Pythagorean idea of the one and the indefinite dyad bringing rise to everything, which is that there's an old idea by the Pythagoreans, probably not Pythagoras himself, but certainly others who carried his name. Pythagoras being a triangle guy. If you know him by anything, it's probably that, the Pythagorean theorem. Which does predate him, though he was sometimes considered to be the first to prove it. It's not known how much math Pythagoras actually did, but his successors were certainly interested in it. And this idea that all of reality is born from this interaction between the one, which is absolute unity, it's why things are things, and the indefinite dyad, this spectrum between, I guess, much and little, I guess is a way you could think of it, these two that sort of form a spectrum between them. And they interact, and the one is why things are things, and the indefinite dyad is why things are not all the same thing, is I guess one way you could think of it. And from that, everything comes forth. And a great deal of importance is placed on numbers, as we heard from the lecture on the good. It was not a terribly uncommon idea in ancient Greece that, like... So, take for example, right? You would say... we would say 1 plus 2 equals 3. And they would say, that's true, and, you know, Pythagoreans and various Greeks at various times would say, that's true in a sense, but there's also a sense in which 1, 2, and 3 each exist purely and have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Which does sort of tie into what we were talking about back here a little bit. So if you would assume that if you talk about the form of number, of a variance number, which is a disputed idea amongst various Platonic successors, whether that transfers in quite that way. That is, I guess, our setup for Timaeus. The idea of the forms is mentioned with some the idea of the forms is alluded to in some frequency, although it's important to note the Timaeus, and we'll give some background on what's going on with the Timaeus precisely. I don't know why fucking VTube Studios did that. Being quite strange. We'll watch model dragging. Okay. Do I still have your attention after all that? Checking in. I guess, and so we're using John Boyer's Plato Reader, a thing I saw on Twitter pretty recently for our text. And we'll talk a little bit about what the Timaeus actually is relative to other dialogues, where it's placed before we super dive in. Yes, I can't engage as much because of the chat delay. You can move to Twitch, or alternatively, you can just sort of chime in with... You can move to Twitch if you want, or you can chime in with things, and I'll answer them as they come up. We can go backwards. I'm fine with that. It's up to you. If it's on Twitch, I'll see you on Twitch. Okay. So, Timaeus, I think I'll swap to Twitch then. Okay, I'll see you over there. The Timaeus is considered a late dialogue, as is pointed out here. It is often considered, I believe, to be one of his last. It was... Vagaboosh, hello. You won't be on display on the chat window, but that's okay. I'll still be reading it, and if you ask questions, I will elaborate them. It's traditionally placed to his late period. It's one of the last. At least in the eyes of scholars. Again, we're doing a little bit of reconstructive work based on how ideas develop, and stylistic developments. It's believed that it was originally part of a trilogy. So it's the Timaeus, the Critias, which is unfinished, and then there was going to be a third, the Hermistocles, which it's anyone's guess what that would have been talked about. We have a bit of the Critias, so we know what that was. But he never finished the Critias. He instead went on to write the law. He went on to write the Laws, which was his final one, we believe. And that by the time he was done with that, his what's generally considered to be dementia had apparently progressed to a point where he could no longer continue to write. I guess one more thing I'll mention is the stuff about the one of the indefinite dyad. We do know at the very least that according to Aristotle, his immediate successor, his nephew Speusippus, was very concerned with this stuff. So that's maybe another point in thinking that this stuff might be hidden in there. We'll keep it in mind as we go through this. So, later dialogue. One of the most, possibly his most influential. There was a long period in medieval history where, for a good chunk of Europe, because they survived elsewhere, they survived in the Greek world and the Muslim world. The Timaeus was all the Plato that you had. It was this and the stuff that Aristotle briefly mentions. And it was I believe the Phaedo and the Meno maybe came over a little bit before some of the other stuff, but then in the Renaissance you see an explosion of this stuff getting translated by Massili Ficino. Anyway, so that's the background. This like the idea that this was Plato for a long time, for a large portion of the Western world. As you can see, this site gives you comparative text, which is awesome. But I can't read ancient Greek, so we're just going to stick with the English. And we'll go sort of line by line. I'll identify things that seem important to me. And you can also tell me if the music's too loud and I need to turn it down if it's making it hard to focus. I'm kind of split on it at the moment. Here's what I might do. I might turn it down on this side. So, if we start with Plato, Socrates, as written by Plato, meeting up with three figures, three individuals. That would be the Timaeus, Critias, and Themistocles. I don't know so much about Themistocles. I know that Timaeus is almost certainly not a real person. And I know that Critias is. He was an important political figure in Athens and ultimately one of the two. Oh, that's a shame, but that's okay. He was ultimately one of the so-called 30 tyrants of Athens, the sort of pro-Spartan puppet government that was installed in the aftermath of the Peloponnesian War. So he comes with a fair bit of baggage. I know aliases were crazy common in ancient Greece. Yes and no. Timaeus probably just isn't a guy. There are some works written pseudonymously under his name from much later, which I'm not super familiar with. So there's a little bit of a history of a pseudo Timaeus, but this guy is not a real guy. But Socrates says, I'm sorry, I need to turn the music down for my sake apparently, so this might not be super audible at all. Just trying to keep it audible, but not too audible. Okay. Socrates says, 1, 2, 3. But where, my dear Timaeus, is the fourth of our guests of yesterday, our hosts of today? So, I immediately have shit to talk about. This is an interesting little opening. And it may not actually be interesting, but people have found it interesting. And they've read a lot, because I talked about how important number is, right? So this sort of counting up and then leaving this fourth as a mystery. People have read all kinds of things into that. I know that Proclus, a very late Platonist, tries to read back into this some allusion to his ineffable triad of same, different, sameness, difference, and mixture. I don't see that there, but so it goes. Timaeus says, some sickness has befallen him, Socrates, for he would never have stayed away from our gathering of his own free will. Then the task of filling the place of the absent one falls upon you and our friends here, does it not? Undoubtedly. And we shall do our best not to come short. For indeed, it would not be at all right after the splendid hospitality we received from you yesterday, if we, that is, those who are left of us, fail to entertain you cordially in return. Alright. I'm in trouble with the scroll wheel. Okay, we can use this method, that's okay. Well then, do you remember the extended character of the subject which I proposed for your discussion? In part we do remember them. And if what we have forgotten, you are present to remind us. Or rather, if it is not a trouble, recount them again briefly from the beginning, so as to fix them more firmly in our minds. It shall be done. The main part of the discourse I delivered yesterday was concerned with the kind of constitution which seemed to me likely to prove the best in the character of its citizens. And in truth, Socrates, the polity you described was highly approved by us all. This is all Socrates and Timaeus, in case you're tabbed out or something. And I'm gonna have things to say about this. I want to get a little ways into it. Did we not begin by dividing off the class of land workers in it and all other crafts from the class of its defenders? Yes. And when, in accordance with nature, we had assigned to each citizen as one and proper peculiar occupation, we declared that those whose duty it is to fight in defense of all must act solely as guardians of the state, because anyone from without or any of those within should go about to molest it, and that they should judge leniently such as are under their authority and their natural friends, but show themselves stern in battle towards all the enemies they encounter. Very true. Again, I'm getting a ways into this, and I'll revisit some of this. For we says, I think, the soul of the guardians ought to be of a nature at once spirited and philosophic in a superlative degree, so that they might be able to treat their friends rightly with leniency and their foes with sternness. Those are used in communist. Whoa. Does it mean land workers in the state in the same way those are used in communist theory? We will come back to it. I want to get through a bit of this, but that's a good question. That's not me reprimanding you. That's a good question asking. And what are their training? Do we not say that they were trained in gymnastic, in music, and in the studies proper for such men? Certainly. I'll do one more of these, and I'll sort of go back. I'll sort of elaborate on what the hell we're talking about here. And it was said, I believe, that the men thus trained should never regard silver or gold or anything else as their own private property, but as auxiliaries, who in return for their guard work receive from those who they protect such a moderate wage as suffices temperate men. They should spend their wage in common and live together in fellowship one with another, devoting themselves unceasingly to virtue, but keeping free from all their pursuits. That was too stated as you say. Okay, we'll continue this. What's happening here is we're recapping the first bit of Republic. So Republic is, I think, the longest of the dialogues. It's a big fucking piece of writing, and it goes in many directions. And I guess it's ultimately about what the actual benefits of being just are. You could think of it as being a good person. That's kind of a modern way to think of it. Maybe that doesn't map perfectly. The sort of argument that starts is, ever sure the means results of production is in communist theory? No. I know you're joking, but no, we'll get into this. Also, the two chats are overlaid. No, and we'll explain what he's actually saying here in a bit. So the point of Republic is arguably, for how influenced it is as a work of political philosophy, arguably not political, because this whole point, the whole sort of discussion is whether it's like better to be a just person, to be good. And the conclusion that he ultimately comes away with is yes, because though you can gain reward by being a bad person, The bad, like, people who don't have a good moral core are kind of just, they don't know what they want or need. They sort of let their own desires lead them every which way, and they're constantly sort of unsure of where they're standing. They just don't have any, they don't have the self-discipline to appreciate anything, is the idea. And that begins with this very labored it goes in all sorts of directions. There's talk of like the forms we discussed, there's talk of what it means to know things, like all kinds of stuff. But it all begins with this very labored political metaphor about what the ideal city means. And it's funny that you say, do they mean the state in the same as communistic theory? Pointedly, no. Because Plato in his time had two ideas for what a government could look like. The first was an empire like the Persians had. So, a monarch sort of ruling over various indirectly ruling over various satrapies and collecting tithe from them. Or the city-state. So, a very small, very concentrated political place as a city. So he's definitely not thinking of anything that close to what we call a state. Thinking of something very, very micro. And the system he's laying out here is basically this. Republic separates into three. He only really talks about two here. You have your sort of worker class who is left to do their thing. And then you have a military class whose lives are kept extremely regimented. They don't own property, they don't concern themselves with property, they eat together, they live together. Like what sort of music and stories they consume, what food they eat even, is very carefully regimented to sort of create people who are simple, who are humble, who don't have the sort of ambition that would make them take all the weapons they have and overthrow the government, right? That's sort of the idea here. And the idea being that heavily controlled is very, yeah. Like it's a thing where like people who have this sort of character are taken very young to the point where they can't remember whatever they were doing before. And the idea is eventually you won't need to do that because something breeding programs, like the people, not as disturbing as that sounds. We're still talking about consensual relationships, but you're only gonna be sort of intermingling with the people of your own class, right? And there's a level of determinism there. Interestingly, not gender segregated though, which was very bold for his time. Sounds crazy more a little bit. But yes, they are supposed to also have a level of philosophical training. In the Republic, he specifies that the ruler class, who he doesn't really talk about here, but they're in the Republic, should devote themselves completely to philosophy. And that's the big thing. And you can see the influence here of the Athens, which was a democracy at the time, putting his mentor Socrates on trial for corrupting a youth and killing him. You can see how that affected Plato a little bit in that. Anyway, we were just talking about gender integration, because that's what we're getting to next. Moreover, so Socrates picks us up. Moreover, we went on to say about women that their natures must be attuned into accord with the men, and that the occupation assigned to them, both in war and in all other activities of life, should in every case be the same for all alike. That matter also stated exactly so. Okay, one more thing about this. I mentioned earlier that it goes on along for this, and Plato might be serious about it, he might be doing something else, but it's presented as a launching off point for a metaphor about it, for like a lesson about individual people. much less so than something we should actually implement. Whereas here, it's being treated very straightforward, and I don't quite know what the difference there means, but it's interesting, right? Picking up. And what about the matter of child production? Or was this a thing easy to recollect because of the strangeness of our proposal? For we ordain that as regards marriages and children, all should have all in common, so that no one should ever recognize his own particular offspring, but all should regard all as their actual kinsmen, as brothers and sisters, if of a suitable age, as parents and grandparents, if more advanced in age, as children and children's children, if junior in age. Okay, if advanced, as parents and grandparents, if more advanced in age, as children, if junior in age. Okay, this is another thing, the sort of communal family aspect. This was only for the military class. We don't care enough about the working people to try to regiment them as much as this particularly. Yes, this is also, as you say, easy to recollect. This is maybe reflects certain Greek values about the Greeks were always a little more at least in most cases always a little more interested in political units than they were family units. But that's a whole other thing. In order that, to the best of our power, they might at once become as good as possible in their natural characters, do we not recollect how we said that the rulers, male and female, in dealing with marriage unions, must contrive to secure, by some secret method of allotment, that the two classes of bad men and good shall each be mated by a lot with women of a like nature, in that no enmity shall occur amongst them because of this, seeing that they will ascribe the allotment to chance. So we're stacking the deck in the background, doing a little bit of eugenics. I'd forgotten he just uses the term bad men. Yeah, that's a bit blunt. Okay. And do you recollect further how we said that the offspring of the good were to be reared, but those of the bad were to be sent privily to various other parts of the state, and that these grew up, and as these grew up, the rulers should keep constantly on the... And this is a hot take, but eugenics are bad, yes. It's like fucking weird magical eugenics, too. It's not actually based in anything particularly. Even like pseudoscience. It's just kind of vibes. Keep constantly on the watch for the deserve... And that as these grew up, the rulers should keep constantly on the watch for the deserving amongst them, and bring them back again into the place of those thus restored, transplant the undeserving among themselves. That's fine. So we said. Hopefully the ending gets resolved. May we say that we have now gone through our discourse of yesterday, so far as is requisite in a summary review, or is there any point omitted, my dear, which we should like to see added? Certainly not. This is precisely what was said, Socrates. So Socrates is going to start fucking yapping here. Let's go. And now, in the next place, listen to what my feeling is with regard to the polity we have described. I may compare my feeling to something of this kind. Suppose, for instance, that on seeing beautiful creatures, whether works of art or actually alive but in repose, a man should be moved with desire to behold them in motion and vigorously engaged in some such exercise as seems suitable to their physique. Well, that is the very feeling I have regarding the state we have described. Gladly would I listen to anyone who should depict in our words our state contending against others in those struggles which states wage, and how proper a spirit it enters upon war, and how in its warring it exhibits qualities such as befit its education and training in its dealings with each several state, whether in respect of military actions or in respect of verbal negotiations. I'll get to it, don't worry. And herein, Critias and Hermocrates, I think I called him Hermistocles, sorry buddy. Fucking Hermocrates, my buddy. I am conscious of my own inability ever to magnify sufficiently our citizens and our state. Now, in this inability of mine, there is nothing surprising, but I have formed the same opinion about the poets also. those of the present as well as those of the past. Not that I disparage in any way the poetic clan, but it is plain to all that the imitative tribe will imitate with most ease and success the things amidst which it has been reared. Whereas it is hard for any man to imitate well in action what lies outside of the range of his rearing, and still harder in speech. Again, as to the class of sophists, although I esteem them highly versed in many fine discourses of other kinds, yet I fear lest fearing lest haply, seeing they are a class which roams from city to city and has no settled habitation of its own, they may go wide of the mark in regard to men who are at once philosophers and statesmen, and what they would be likely to do and say in their several dealings with foemen in war and battle, both by word and deed. Okay. This is a lot to say. I wonder how this would look in practice. He's saying, I wonder how this would look in practice. I wonder how they'd fight, how they'd deal with other sort of city-states. And I don't think, creative writing is going to get us to a good answer. That's what he's saying. He's not interested in he wants to know, but he's not interested in speculation. Thus, there remains only that class of which is of your complexion, a class which, alike by nature and nurture, shares the qualities of both the others. For our friend is a native of most well-governed state, Italian Locris, and inferior to none of its citizens either in property or in rank. And not only has he occupied the highest offices and posts of honor in his state, but he has also attained, in my opinion, the very summit of eminence in all branches of philosophy. As to Critias, all of us here know that he is no novice in any of the subjects we are discussing. As regards Hermocrates, we must believe that the many witnesses who assert that both by nature and by nurture he is competent for all these inquiries. So, with this in mind, when you requested me yesterday to expound my views of the polity, I gratified you most willingly, as I knew that none could deal more adequately than you, if you were willing, with the next subject of discourse. For you alone, of men now living, could show our state engaged in a suitable war and exhibiting all the qualities which belong to it. Accordingly, when I had spoken upon my prescribed theme, I in turn prescribed for you this theme which I am now explaining. And you, after consulting together among yourself, agreed to pay me back today with the feast of words. So here I am, ready for that feast in festal garb and eager above all men to begin. Okay. He's saying, Hermocrates and Critias, you're going to tell me how this would all work in practice. That's what I'm passing the baton. We've sussed out the theory, let's talk the practice. And you two know your politics, you know your philosophy. You know people, you can do this. I'm gonna trust creative writing, but I trust you to do it. But they're about to surprise him with a delightful little story. Hermocrates says, "Of a truth, Socrates, as our friend has said, we will show no lack of zeal, nor have we any excuse for refusing to do as you say. Yesterday, in fact, immediately after our return from you to the guest chamber at Critias where we are lodging, and earlier still on our way there, we were considering these very subjects. Critias has mentioned to us a story derived from ancient tradition, and now, Critias, pray tell it again to our friend here, so he may help us decide whether or not it's pertinent to our prescribed theme." So, Critias is going to do you one better. Critias says, "That I must certainly do, if our third party also approves." Assuredly, I approve. We're going to slip into Critias here. And a little word on Critias. Like I said, he's a relative of Plato's, actually, and he was a member of the 30 tyrants, as they were known. Now, despite having some clear authoritarian tendencies, the Republic also makes clear that Plato doesn't think there's much worse you can be than a tyrant, than someone who hijacks the state for their whims and their whims alone. So this could be a little bit loaded. But there's another thing about Critias, which is that his family is very old, so he has pedigree to tell us. He has potential legitimate pedigree to tell a story like this. So it's unclear precisely how we're meant to think about Critias. There's things for him, things against him. And it's not clear exactly which of those ways he's being used. Critias says, "Listen then, Socrates, to a tale which, though passing strange, is yet wholly true, as Solon, the wisest of the seven, once upon a time declared. Now Solon, as indeed he often says himself in his poems, was a relative and very dear friend of our great-grandfather Drumpides." Okay, Solon deserves some explanation. Solon is the guy who is said to have given democratic Athens its constitution. One of these sort of founding figures, an Athenian George Washington, I guess. A lot of sort of Greek city-states had a figure that filled this role. If you're a Spartan, you would know Lycurgus. If you for Crete, you had Minos, people like that. So this is a founding figure of Athens as they knew it, and one who was treated with a kind of pseudo-divine air sometimes. Andropides told our grandfather Critias, as the old man himself, so Critias Senior, I suppose, in turn related to us that the exploits of this city in olden days, the record of which had perished through time, the destruction of its inhabitants, was great and marvelous, the greatest of all being one which it would be proper for us now to relate both as a payment of our debt of thanks to you, and also as a tribute of praise, chanted as it were duly and truly, in honor of the goddess on this her day of festival. So again, we're setting this on the festival, so we're giving this a little bit of divine prominence. The Republic did a similar thing. And again, this seems like it's being set up as a sequel to Republic, but again, the details are a little bit mismatched. These were not the people who were here for Republic. And indeed, again, we're leaving out the sort of greater individual virtue implications of Republic in favor of just treating it like a big political talk. Does this difference matter? Is it just a matter of time and different goals? I don't know. Excellent. But come now, what was this exploit described by Critias following Solon's report as a thing not verbally recorded, although actually performed by this city long ago? Critias says, "I will tell you. It is an old tale, and I heard it from a man not young. For indeed at that time, as he said himself, Critias was already... He just calls his grandfather as the same name, just by his own name. Which is not that abnormal for the ancient Greek stuff, but it's a little bit vexing. Critias was already close upon 90 years of age, while I was somewhere about 10, and it chanced to be that day of the Apaturia, which is called Kuriotis. Your guess is as good as mine. I could look this up, I don't think it matters that much. The ceremony for boys, which was always customary at the feast, was held also on that occasion, our fathers arranging contests and recitation. So while many poems of many poets were declaimed, since the poems of Solon were at that time new, many of us children chanted them. And one of our fellow tribesmen, whether he really thought so at the time or whether he was paying a compliment to Critias, declared that in his opinion Solon was not only the wisest of men in all else, but in poetry also he was of all poets the noblest. Whereat the old man, I remember the scene well, was highly pleased and said with a smile, if only, Amenander, he had not taken up poetry as a byplay, but he had worked hard at it like others. And if he had completed the story he brought here from Egypt, fucking highlight that real quick, instead of being forced to lay it aside owing to the seditions and all the other evils he found here on his return. Why then, I say, neither Hesiod nor Homer nor any other poet would ever have proved more famous than he. And what was the story, Critias? Said the other. Its subject, replied Critias, was a very great exploit, worthy indeed to be accounted the most notable of all exploits. which was performed by this city. Although the record of it has not endured until now owing to lapse of time and the destruction of those who wrought it. Tell us from the beginning, said Amenander. What Solon related and how? It's fine. I'm just kind of it's fine. You're not adding much. I'm just sort of fucking. I'm getting to things that are cool. And how? And who were the informants who vouched for its truth? In the delta of Egypt, said Critias, where at its head the stream of the Nile parts in two, there's a certain district called the Siddiq. The chief city in that district is Sais, the home of King Amasis, the founder of which they say is a goddess whose Egyptian name is Neith, and in Greek, as they assert, Athena. A little bit of syncretism here. Between these two goddesses. Most intriguing. The people profess to be great lovers of Athens, and in a measure akin to our people here. So we're seeing the appeal to Egyptian authority, which is a common sort of Greek thing, because the Greeks had a couple of contradicting views. The first was that the Greeks were the best. You know, they're the most cultured, the most developed. But there was one that this sort of fought with, and that is the power of pedigree. That the ancientness of something grants legitimacy. And Egypt was still just unfathomably ancient to Greek civilization at the time. Because Greek civilization had a reset in the Bronze Age collapse. Egypt had declined greatly during that time, but had not collapsed. The sort of proto-Greek civilization had collapsed. So to them, it just seemed like Egypt was this thing that just been there forever. So they gave a lot of deference to them. And they sort of leaned on them quite a bit to sort of bolster ideas. And Solon said that when he traveled there, he was held in great esteem among them. Moreover, when he was questioning such of their priests as were most versed in ancient lore about their early history, he discovered that neither he himself nor any other Greek knew anything at all, one might say, about such matters. And on one occasion, when he wished to draw on them to discourse on ancient history, he attempted to tell them the most ancient of our traditions concerning Pheronius, who was said to be the first man, and Niobe, and he went on to tell a legend about Deucalion and Pyrrha after the flood, and how they survived it. And to give the flood, by the way, interesting. And to give the genealogy of their descendants, and by recounting the number of years occupied by the events mentioned, he tried to calculate the periods of time. Whereupon, one of the priests, a prodigiously old man, said, and this is a phrase that sticks right in my brain, O Solon, you Greeks are always children. There is no such thing as an old Greek. And just as an aside here, I think this is very, very interesting. A bunch of these texts mention floods. Yeah, okay. I will say for the thing about that conspiracy theory is that we're talking about the mud flood. But yeah, I mean, it's also used by creationists. I would also kind of mention that a lot of these places that mention floods are neighbors, basically. So it's... Even if you want to say there was a great flood, it could have very easily just been... It could have been massive, but still regional, but I wouldn't even go that far. The funny thing is, Egypt doesn't have a ton of flood stuff, and that's probably because the Nile floods very predictably. It's not... The Nile doesn't have a lot of catastrophic flooding. I know, I'm not saying I necessarily think that. Sorry, were you hearing me fucking, like, shake my drink? I don't know what happened there. Oh, I know, sorry, that was a mistype. Anyway, you can sort of finish your thought. Anyway, so... It's funny, I was talking about Greek chauvinism, and how sort of, the sort of pedestal they put themselves on. I also did hear you shake your drink. Apologies for that. I'll do less of that. But it's sort of interesting to contrast it with the level of infantilism we see here. Of the sort of Greeks, and of sort of Plato inserting the Greeks as this baby brother to the Egyptian civilization. That gets kind of a nice, quiet little pat on the head and is sent on its way, right? Again, just sort of shows ideas about how much knowledge has been lost. In different things. Okay. And on hearing this, he asked, "What mean you by this saying?" And the priest replied, "You are young in soul, every one of you. For therein... Shut up. For therein you possess... No, I didn't mean to open you. For therein you possess not a single belief that is ancient and derived from old tradition, nor yet one science that is hoary with age. And this is the cause thereof. There have been, and there will be, many and diverse destructions of mankind, of which the greatest are by fire and water, and the lesser ones by countless other means. For in truth, the story that is told in your country as well as ours, how once upon a time Phaethon, son of Helios, yoked his father's chariot, and, because he was unable to drive it along the course taken by his father, burnt up all that was upon the earth and himself perished by a thunderbolt. That story, as it is told, has the fashion of a legend. But the truth of it lies in the occurrence of a shifting in the bodies of the heavens, which move round the earth, and a destruction of the things on the earth by fierce fire, which recurs at long intervals. At such times, all they that dwell on the mountains and in high and dry places suffer destruction more than those who dwell near to rivers or the sea. And in our case, the Nile, our savior in other ways, saves us also at such times from this calamity by rising high. And when, on the other hand, the gods purge the earth with a flood of waters, all the herdsmen and shepherds that are in the mountains are saved. But those in the cities of your land are swept into the sea by the streams. Whereas in our country, neither then nor at any other time does the water pour down over our fields from above. On the contrary, it all tends to naturally well up from below." I'm not sure entirely what phenomenon in the Egyptian area he's getting at the next part, but I suppose I think what he's saying, just that Greece is, if you go by the sort of cycle of destruction, that apparently Greece is in a particularly bad spot and its culture will continually be swept away. That's sort of what he's getting at here. And that's why they, and again, Greece did experience a cultural collapse, which left much of like their history feeling very incomplete. So there is something to this, but it's obviously mythologized and combined with various other things. Hence it is for these reasons that what is here preserved is reckoned to be most ancient. The truth being that in every place where there is no excessive heat or cold to prevent it, there always exists some human stock, now more, now less in number. And if any event has occurred that is noble or great, in any way conspicuous, whether it be in your country or in ours or in some other place of which we know by report, all such events are recorded from of old and preserved here in our temples. Whereas your people and the others are but newly equipped every time with letters and all such art as the civilized states require. And when, after the usual interval of years, like a plague, the flood from heaven comes sweeping down afresh upon your people, it leaves none of you but the unlettered and uncultured, so that you become young as ever, with no knowledge of all that happened in old times in this land or your own. So Egypt, apparently, according to this sort of mythologizing of it, carries records of all these sort of pre-disaster times. It survives each. Certainly, the genealogies which you related just now, Solon, concerning the people of your country, are little better than children's tales. For, in the first place, you remember but one deluge, though many had occurred previously. And next, you are ignorant of the fact that the noblest and most perfect race amongst men were born in the land where you now dwell. And from, don't read too much into the use of race here. It's not like anything we would describe as race. He's not making a racial supremacy or purity case in the way we would think. There's a little bit of that, but he doesn't even think about it, really. I wouldn't... Again, just don't... Like, this is bad, but it's not as rife with baggage as it seems. Again, just a little bit of Greek chauvinism here. Not anything... That's a little bit sinister, but nothing like, extremely sinister going on here. And from them, both you yourself are sprung, and the whole of your existing city, out of some little seed that chanced to be left over. But this has escaped your notice because for many generations the survivors died with no power to express themselves in writing. For verily at one time, Solon, before the greatest destruction by water, what is now the Athenian state was the bravest in war and supremely well organized also in all other respects. It is said that it possessed the most splendid works of art and the noblest polity of any nation under heaven of which we have heard tell. Upon hearing this, Solon said that he marveled, and with the utmost eagerness requested the priest to recount for him in order and exactly all the facts about those citizens of old. Okay, the priest then said, I begrudge you not the story, Solon. Nay, I will tell it, both for your own sake and that of your city, and most of all for the sake of the goddess who has adopted for her own both your land and this of ours, and has nurtured and trained them. You first, by the space of 1,000 years, when she had received the seed of you from Gea and Hephaestus, and after that ours. And the duration of our civilization set down in our sacred writings is 8,000 years. Egypt is old. I believe this is still much, well, I mean, I know this is still much too old. But you know, if it's you know, the number is a nice little booster to the mystique. Of the citizens, then, who lived 9,000 years ago, I will declare to you briefly certain of their laws and the noblest of the deeds they performed. So he's saying, ancient. So the claim here is that this priest is going to tell Solon, closer to like 1 to 2,000, something like that, yeah. Is that Solon here is going to tell, well, this priest is going to tell Solon about ancient Athens from thousands and thousands of years ago. And he's going to tell him that it was great, it was mighty, it was the grandest of cities. Yeah. Well, in ancient Athens, like he's describing, just is not a thing. I don't think ancient Egypt is 16,000 years. That doesn't sound right. That sounds like, I mean, we can just look it up. There's nothing wrong with doing on-the-spot research. If it doesn't lock up anyway, but even if it does, we can... This is usually fixable. I've found ways to fix it. Alright. It's fine. It emerged from prehistoric Egypt around 3150 BC. Not even fucking close. The 8,000, as I thought, the 8,000 year number is still even too long. It's around 3K, yeah. About 2,600-ish actually years ago from when this was written, something like that. The full account, in precise order and detail, we shall go through later at our leisure, taking the actual writings. To get a view of their laws, look at the laws here, for you will find existing here at the present time many examples of the laws which then existed in your city. You see, first, how the priestly class is separated off from the rest, next the class of craftsmen, of which each sort works by itself without mixing with any other, then the classes of shepherds, hunters, and farmers, each distinct and separate. Moreover, the military class here, as no doubt you have noticed, is kept apart from all the other classes being enjoined by the law to devote itself solely to the work of training for war. Yeah. Yeah, the numbers are actually very, very close. If you look at it, depending on when you think ancient Greece ends, which you can argue it's like maybe like 500 CE, depending on how you're defining things. A further feature is the character of their... Anyway, any of this sound familiar? A further feature is the character of their equipment with shields and spears. For we were the first of the peoples of Asia to adopt these weapons, it being the goddess who instructed us, even as she instructed you first of all the dwellers in yonder lands. Yes, the perfect method of war, the phalanx, which will never be innovated upon. It's too good. Anyway, again, with regard to wisdom, you perceive, no doubt, the law here. How much attention it has devoted from the very beginning to the cosmic order, by discovering all the effects which the divine cause produce upon human life. It sounds a little bit stoic. Down to divination and the art of medicine, which aims at health, and by its mastery, also all of the other subsidiary studies. So when, at that time, the goddess had furnished you, before all others, with all this orderly and regular system, she established your state, choosing the spot wherein you were born, since she perceived there in a climate duly blended, and how that it would bring forth men of supreme wisdom. Again, actually come down and teach them how to use shields. What was the actual analog? It's hard to say. It's always a little bit hard to say what precise role Plato thinks the gods do. He seems to view them as much more indirect forces than a lot of the myths portray them. And the Republic even talks about how the myths show the gods doing all these like immoral things, like getting jealous and being lustful. We gotta censor them. Like that's the whole thing in the Republic. Because we can't have people thinking that's godly. So it's interesting. He has a bit of a different view on them, but it's not entirely clear what he's getting at here. Might just be presenting it in a way that would like make sense to as like a story. I mean, hey, it's not like you're gonna tell me you feel like Zeus in the myths was being very normal and consensual about it. And he's got a point there. But anyway. So it was that the goddess, being herself both a lover of war and a lover of wisdom, chose the spot which was likely to bring forth men most like unto herself. Okay, this is a big thing about Greek chauvinism. They have a climatological theory. They think that they're in the Goldilocks zone of creating people that are normal. This idea has been adapted in various ways. Like I know like it's not too hot, it's not too cold, so therefore we are the most well-rounded people. That's part of the idea, at least. And this first she established. Wherefore you lived under the rule of such laws as these, yea, and laws still better, and you surpassed all men in every virtue, as became those who were the offspring and nurslings of gods. Many in truth, and great are the achievements of your state, which are a marvel to men as they are here recorded. There is one which stands out above all, both for magnitude and for nobleness. For it is related in our records how once upon a time your state stayed the course of a mighty host, which, starting from a distant point in the Atlantic Ocean, was insolently advancing to attack the whole of Europe and Asia to boot. I'm waiting for the shoe to drop with this. I'm waiting to drop the other shoe with this. Don't read ahead. Don't. For the ocean there was at the time navigable. For in front of the mouth, which you Greeks call, as you say, the Pillars of Heracles, the Strait of Gibraltar, I think. There lay an island which was larger than Libya and Asia together. And it was possible for travelers of that time to cross it from it to the other islands, and from the islands to the whole of the continent, over against them, which encompassed that veritable ocean. For all that we have here, lying within the mouth of which we speak, is evidently a haven having a narrow entrance, but that yonder is a real ocean. And the land surrounding it may most rightly be called in the fullest and truest sense, a continent. Now, in this island of Atlantis, pause for effect, you are looking at the beginning of Atlantis as a concept. There is no record of this before this. This is where it starts. People treat it as like other Greek myths, and no, it's much later than anything from Homer and Hesiod. This is where it begins, here in the Timaeus. As far as we know, there may be older writings, but it seems to be an invention of Plato's. But there, in this island of Atlantis, there existed a confederation of kings, of great and marvelous power. The Atlantis is more extensively discussed in the Critias, or it would be if it was finished. This is prelude to something quite different. The Timaeus goes in a very different direction. It's a confederation of kings of great and marvelous power, which held sway over all the island. In many other islands, also in parts of the continent, and moreover, of the lands here within the straits, they ruled over Libya as far as Egypt, and over Europe as far as Tuscany. So this host, being all gathered together, made an attempt one time to enslave by one single onslaught both your country and ours and the whole of the territory within the straits. And then it was, Solon, that the manhood of your state showed itself conspicuous for valor and might in the sight of all the world, for it stood preeminent above all in gallantry and all warlike arts, and acting partly as leader of the Greeks and partly standing alone by itself when deserted by all others. After encountering the deadliest perils, it defeated the invaders and reared a trophy, whereby it saved from slavery such as were not yet enslaved, and all the rest of us who dwelt within the bounds of Heracles and ungrudgingly set free. So ancient Athens, when Atlantis went on its big conquest, ancient Athens stood up and beat him back with its power of that whole big government thing we talked about at the beginning. That's what let it harnessed that to do that, supposedly. And this is obviously, we're seeing a lot of mirrors to the Persian War, where the Persians came in and burned Athens, but were ultimately defeated by a coalition led by Athens in a big naval battle. That's interesting. But in a later time, there occurred portentous earthquakes and floods, and one grievous day and night befell them, when the whole body of your warriors was swallowed up by the earth. And this island of Atlantis in like manner was swallowed up by the sea and vanished. Wherefore, also the ocean that spot had now become impassable and unsearchable, being blocked up by the shoal mud which the island created as it settled down. I don't know precisely what phenomenon it's describing here is like sort of out by the Strait of Gibraltar, but as ever, Atlantis is flooded, and apparently Athens comes off pretty rough in the endeavor as well. So, anyway, back to present time. You have now heard, Socrates, in brief outline, the account given by the elder Critias of what he heard from Solon. And when you were speaking yesterday about the state and the citizens you were describing, I marveled as I called to mind the facts I am now relating, reflecting what a strange piece of fortune it was that your description coincided so exactly for the most part with Solon's account. Plato could time travel. Yes, it is known. It is known. I might need to go grab a drink in a minute, but I'll keep this going for a little bit longer. Before then, maybe at like 2:10 or so. I was loath, however, to speak on the instant, for owing to lapse of time, my recollection of his account was not sufficiently clear. So I decided that I ought not to relate it until I had first gone over it all carefully in my own mind. Consequently, I readily consented to the theme you proposed yesterday, as I thought we should be reasonably well provided for the task of furnishing a satisfactory discourse, which in all such cases is the greatest task. So it was that, as Hermocrates has said, the moment I left your place yesterday, I began to relate to them the story as I recollected it. And after I parted from them, I pondered it over during the night, and recovered, as I may say, the whole story. Marvelous, indeed, is the way in which the lessons of one's childhood grip the mind, as the saying is. For myself, I know not whether I could recall to mind all that I heard yesterday. But as to the account I heard such a great time ago, I should be immensely surprised if a single detail of it has escaped me. I had then the greatest pleasure and amusement in hearing it, and the old man was eager to tell me, as I kept questioning him repeatedly, that the story is stamped firmly on my mind like the encaustic designs of an indelible painting. Moreover, immediately after daybreak, I related the same story to our friends here, so that they might share in my rich provision of discourse. Now, therefore, I want to at least get to the pivot before I go grab a drink. Now, therefore, this is the purpose of all that I have been saying. I am ready to tell my tale, not in summary outline, but in full detail just as I heard it. In the city... You never experienced redacted. You're not... Oh man, we need to teach you a little bit about the truth of philosophy. What did he describe as greatest pleasure? I'm trying to think. I'm the greatest pleasure and amusement in hearing it. Okay. He was a child at the time, by the way. Not that that always stopped the Greeks, but you know. In the city with its citizens, which you described to us yesterday, as it were in a fable, we will now transport hither into the realm of fact. So, ancient Athens that fought Atlantis was apparently this sort of highly regimented sort of caste system city that we were discussing hypothetically, supposedly. But we will assume that the city is that ancient city of ours, or it's close enough at least, that we can describe things to it, and declare that the citizens you conceived are in truth the actual progenitors of ours, of whom the priest told. In all ways they will correspond. Nor shall we be out of tune if we affirm that those citizens of yours are the very men who lived in that age. Thus, with united effort, each taking his part, we will endeavor to the best of our powers to do justice to them you have prescribed, to the theme you have prescribed. Wherefore, Socrates, we must consider whether this story is to our mind, or we still have to look for some other to take its place. Socrates says, "What story should we adopt, Critias, in preference to this? For this story will be admirably suited for the festival of the goddess, which is now being held, because of its connection with her. And the fact that it is no invented fable but genuine history is all important. How indeed, and where shall we discover other stories if we let these slip? Nay, it is impossible. You therefore must now deliver your discourse, and may good fortune attend you. While I, in recoil from my speech of yesterday, must now keep silent in my turn and hearken." Consider now, Socrates, Critias says, the order of the feast as we have arranged it. See, okay, here we go. The music kicked into the music changes cool tone. Seeing that Timaeus is our best astronomer and has made it his special task to learn about the nature of the universe, it seemed good to us that he should speak first, beginning with the origin of the cosmos and ending with the generation of mankind. After him, I am to follow, taking over from him mankind, already as it were created by his speech, and taking over from you a select number of men superlatively well trained. Then, in accordance with the word and the law of Solon, I am to bring these before ourselves, as before a court of judges, and make them citizens of the state of ours, regarding them as Athenians of the bygone age whose existence, so long forgotten, has been revealed to us by the record of the sacred writings, and thereforward I am to proceed with my discourse as if I were speaking of men who already are citizens and men of Athens. Socrates says, we'll come back to it. Bounteous and magnificent, methinks, is the feast of speech with which I am to be requited. So then, it will be your task, it seems, to speak next, when you have duly invoked the gods. Okay. Something has happened here. If we look at what's actually being said, and I find this super fascinating because I don't have a good reason for why this is done like this. And I think it's fascinating. What he says is, yeah, I'll talk about Atlantis. I'll talk about, the government of Athens, which fought Atlantis. But we should really start at the beginning. Hey, Timaeus, my friend, do you have any thoughts on the beginning of time? What's happening here? Why is this necessary prelude? And this is part of what sort of leads me to think that it's not entirely absurd. There's like secret meanings hidden, like encoded into these. Stuff like this that feels otherwise completely inexplicable. That being said, I need to go grab another drink. Maybe some chips or something. Maybe not chips, I'll probably save those. I'll be back in about 5 minutes, I think. 3 to 5 minutes. Alright, I'm back. I'm sorry to hear your pizza's bad. That is unfortunate. Okay. Okay. So, we're gonna... decided that Critis is gonna talk about Atlantis, but... we have decided that Critias is going to talk about Atlantis, but there's a bit of a wrench in that. But he's insisted that it is for some reason it is only proper that Timaeus give this sort of account of the beginning of everything first. Now, you said you weren't really clear on the ancient Greek view on this. You're not going to be that much clearer. You're gonna learn about, I guess, sort of the ancient Greeks starting from when this was written onwards view, because this was very influential. But it's also very non-traditional compared to if you look at like what's in Hesiod. Okay. Timaeus will say, "Nay, so that, Socrates, all men who possess even a small share of good sense call upon God always at the outset of every undertaking, be it small or great. We therefore, who are purposing to deliver a discourse concerning the universe, how it was created or haply is uncreate, must needs invoke gods and goddesses, if so be that we are not utterly demented, praying that all we say may be approved by them in the first place, and secondly by ourselves. Grant, then, that we have thus duly invoked the deities. Ourselves we must also invoke so to proceed, so that you may most easily learn, I may most clearly expound my views regarding the subject before us." We're in Timaeus, and we're going to stay with Timaeus for a lot of what comes next, for pretty much all of what comes next. Now, first of all, we must, in my judgment, make the following distinction. What is that which existent always and has no becoming? And what is that which is becoming always and never is existent? Go ahead and talk about being and becoming. Okay. It's sort of being, the way Plato uses being, the terms being and becoming, he uses them hierarchically. Things are insofar as you can place them definitively. Things become insofar as they are in flux. Might be one way to think of it. And we see, and our sense perception, like our senses, and most of our thinking, there are higher forms of thinking, but a good chunk of our thinking is only really capable of grasping becoming. Is sort of what he has to say about it. Whereas the forms, which we talked about before, you know, true beauty, true life, maybe the virtues, unclear, but true, or it also, like, sort of descriptors, like the truth of weight as such, magnitude as such, or place and time as such. Those all are. Whereas my hand isn't, it becomes. It's perpetually becoming. Right? Okay. That's your crash course. This Coke can isn't, it's becoming. Now, the one of these is apprehensible by thought with the aid of reasoning, since it is ever uniformly existent. Whereas the other is an object of opinion with the aid of unreasoning sensation, since it becomes and perishes and is never really existent. Okay, he's just saying all that. He's just saying what I just said. Would be Coke or Pepsi fans. Coke is vanilla flavored, and I know ancient Greeks were big on honey as a sweetener, so that probably cuts a little closer. Probably more Coke. Probably more Coke. Yeah, it's like lightly vanilla flavored, I believe. Again, everything which becomes must of necessity become owing to some cause. For without a cause, it is impossible for anything to attain becoming. But when the artificer of any object, in forming its shape and quality, keeps his gaze fixed on that which is uniform, using a model of this kind, that object, executed in this way, must of necessity be beautiful. But whenever he gazes at that which has come into existence and uses a created model, the object thus executed is not beautiful. So if a craftsman is basing his work on the true thing, he's aspiring to beauty. If he's making copies of copies of copies, he is not. Now, the whole heaven or cosmos, or if there's any other name which especially prefers, by that let us call it. So, be its name what it may, we must first investigate concerning it that primary question which has to be investigated at the outset in every case. Namely, whether it has existed always, having no beginning of generation, or whether it has come into existence, having begun from some beginning. Incredibly interesting phrasing, given how this will be interpreted later. I'll get to it. It has come into existence, for it is visible and tangible and possessed of a body. So it's real. If it sort of has substance, it was made, is the argument. It was made in some form or fashion. And all such things are sensible, and things sensible, being apprehensible by opinion with the aid of sensation. So it is not like existent in the way the forms are. So it must have it must be an imitation of something, is the idea. Come into existence, as we saw, and are generated. And that which has come into existence must necessarily, as we say, have come into existence by reason of some cause. So something made or caused this, because it's not a thing unto itself. Because we can perceive it, it must be an imitation of something. And if it is an imitation of something, then there's something like it that is realer than it, I suppose, is the argument. Okay. Now we're cooking. Now to discover the maker and father of this universe were a task indeed. And having discovered him, to declare him unto all men were a thing impossible. Okay, you may have to begin to see why the Christians were okay with preserving this one. Well, Christians of some stripe preserved all of them, but there was a fixation on this one. However, let us return and inquire further concerning the cosmos. After which of the models did its architect construct it? Was it after that which is self-identical and uniform? Or after that which has come into existence? Now, if so be that this cosmos is beautiful and its constructor good, it is plain that he fixed his gaze on the eternal. But if otherwise, which is an impious suggestion, his gaze was on that which has come into existence. But it is clear to everyone that his gaze was on the eternal, for the cosmos is the fairest of all that has come into existence, and he the best of all the causes. So, the argumentation here is a little bit odd. It's saying that because the cosmos, which is full of these planets, which are sometimes attributed to gods and whatnot, is good and beautiful, obviously, that it must be made in imitation of something real. And the one who made it, we must ascribe to be good, because if he wasn't good, if he wasn't good, he might settle. You have to be good to not settle in that way, I suppose. So you've got a good guy, you've got a good sort of deity making the universe, is the conclusion here. And he's making it in imitation of something more real. Something or some things. So having in this wise come into existence, it has been constructed after the pattern of that which is apprehensible by reason and thought and is self-identical. Again, if these premises be granted, it is wholly necessary that this cosmos should be a copy of something. Now, in regard to every matter, it is most important to begin at the natural beginning. Accordingly, in dealing with a copy and its model, we must affirm that the accounts given will themselves be akin to the diverse objects which they serve to explain. Those which deal with what is abiding and firm and is discernible by the aid of thought will be abiding and unshakable. And in so far as it is possible and fitting for statements to be irrefutable and invincible, they must in no wise fall short thereof. Let me make sure I'm comprehending this again. We're doing this together. The copy and its model must affirm that the accounts given will themselves be akin to the first objects which they serve. Okay. The accounts is abiding and firm from the aid of thought will be abiding and unshakable. I think he's dealing with the idea of like getting at the truth of it. Okay. Okay, he's talking about how he's going to try and reason this out, I think. That was copied likes the model. Self-will likeness be analogous thereto, but slightly. He's talking about the necessity to figure this, like, try and get at the nature of this whole, of this whole sort of creation story through reasoning. Because if you're mythologizing it, you're just sort of... No, I'm there with you. I think what he's saying is we're going to need to reason this out step by step, because reasoning's how you grasp true things. You grasp things that are more true. If we just sort of speculated, then we're also kind of making a copy of a copy. I think that's what he's getting at here. For I, as being is to becoming, so is truth to belief. Wherefore, Socrates, if in our treatment of a great host of matters regarding the gods and the generation of the universe we prove unable to give accounts that are always in all respects self-consistent and perfectly exact, be not thou surprised. Okay, I'm picking back. I picked back up. I get this now. Rather, we should be content if we could furnish accounts that are inferior to none in likelihood, remembering that both I who speak and you who judge are but human creatures, so that it becomes us to accept the likely account of these matters and forbear to search beyond it. Okay, we have an interesting bit of framing here, which is Timaeus is saying that because we can't claim our reasoning to be perfect, there's a level of ambiguity in the account he's going to give us, baked in. He's not supremely confident in it. There is room for... He's confident in the broad strokes of this, but there's room for him to get details wrong. And he's admitting this up front. Which is interesting. It's an interesting little bit of framing going into what we're doing here. Because Plato could choose to frame all this as authoritatively as he likes. He's the author. So leaving this gulf is peculiar and interesting, and it may have to do with sort of what it's possible to know. And certainly, if you look at someone like Plotinus, who's comes around much later, sort of begins what's often called the sort of Neoplatonist era of Platonic thinking. He has a whole thing about how eventually reason will fail you, and you need to rely on these sort of experiences, these like vision questy sort of shocks to the system that he talked about getting sometimes. That's not what's being said here, but I can see that idea starting here, and that's interesting. The sort of experiential conscious like element of like of consciousness that would enter into Platonic thinking much later, like 600 years later. By the way, Claire, I just want to be clear. You've been great. You've been very helpful. You don't need to keep time. Maybe watch this later, though. That could be fun. Socrates. Excellent, Timaeus. We must by all means accept, as you suggest, and certainly have most cordially accepted your prelude. So now, we beg of you, proceed straight on with the main theme. So everyone's in agreement that there's room for error here. We're gonna wrap. I don't know how much longer we're gonna go because there's I wanna wrap up before Velociphy has their collab and stuff. Timaeus, then. We might not get to the demiurge stuff, which is a shame. Timaeus, let us now state the cause wherefore he that constructed it becoming and the all. He was good, and in him that that is good, no envy arises ever concerning anything. And stuff will still be there for part 2. True. Anything. And being devoid of envy, he desired that all should be, so far as possible, like unto himself. Our divine craftsman, our divine sort of creator, is good. This principle, then, we shall be wholly right in accepting from men of wisdom as being above all the supreme originating principle of becoming in the cosmos. For God desired that, we can call him God if we like, desired that, so far as possible, all things should be good and nothing evil. Wherefore, when he took over all that was visible, seeing that it was not in a state of rest but in a state of discordant and disorderly motion, he brought it into order out of disorder, deeming that the former state isn't always better than the latter. So, we're calling him God, but there's a big difference between what we think of God, which is that he's not creating everything from nothing. He's finding stuff there, and it's all messy and mixed up and bad. He's like, I'm gonna fix this up. Is what this godly sort of being thinks, apparently. Which is, a little bit different than certain ideas that would emerge later. But this sort of alternate way of thinking of God would constantly pops back up throughout the history of thought. The various ways of thinking about him. In Christianity and Judaism, I don't know so much about Islam, still working on filling out my knowledge there. For him who is most good, it neither was nor is permissible to perform any action save what is most fair. Again, absolute goodness. Contrast with ideas of, petty, scheming, feuding gods throughout much of mythology. He's so good he can't look at a bad thing and leave it alone, right? Like it's impossible for this understanding, right? Big sort of shift we're seeing here. As he reflected, therefore, he perceived that us such creatures as are by nature visible, none that is irrational will be fairer, comparing wholes with wholes, than the rational. Rational is superior to the rational. And further, that reason cannot possibly belong to any apart from soul. Soul has been very unceremoniously introduced with a big capital S here. I'm hoping there'll be something. I'm trying to remember if there's something more that I can latch on to in terms of what the fuck, as what he's talking about with soul here. I have some conception, but I need a good line that will help me sort of explain it. So because of this reflection, he constructed reason within soul and soul within body as he fashioned the all. That so the work he was executing might be of its nature most fair and most good. So he's using soul to imbue. He's using soul, which is this thing, I guess, this thing you can sort of work with, to imbue things with rationality. This creative figure is doing this. Thus then, in accordance with the likely account, we must declare that this cosmos has verily come into existence as a living creature endowed with soul and reasoning owing to the providence of God. So being itself, the universe, is a living thing. It has a soul of its own. Big fucking thing here. Not to be neglected. I'm not sure if he was the first to put into these terms, but almost it's crazy how almost no one will fully disagree with this going forward in Greek thinking. Like this the idea of the universe being alive the universe being alive in some sense underpins Stoic thought, like Stoic thought almost completely. I don't know anything about Epicureanism. Aristotle will attach this idea to capital N nature. Various things. They express it differently. They may not use the terminology of life, but this idea that the fact that it obeys certain rules like the fact that like the universe has certain rules, therefore it can be inferred that it's a living organism in a sense. That echoes throughout the ages right there. This being established, we must declare that which comes next in order. In the How do you mean? You said that's kind of odd, especially with like what ancient Greece is known for. It's in order. I'll keep going in the meantime. In the semblance, you can just put it in. In the semblance of which of the living creatures did the constructor of the cosmos construct it? We shall not deign to accept any of those which belong by nature to the category of parts. For nothing that resembles the imperfect would ever become fair. Again, you're not making copies of copies. You're making copies of something true. Otherwise, it would suck. It doesn't suck. It's decent as things go. The universe says, apparently. But we shall affirm that the cosmos, more than aught else, resembles most closely that living creature of which all other living creatures, severally and generically, are portions. For that living creature embraces and contains within itself all the intelligible living creatures, just as the universe contains us and all the other visible living creatures that have been fashioned. People will read this in various ways. Some will think it's gesturing at the one from the one in the infinite dyad I talked about earlier, that sort of absolute unity. There's stuff in the Parmenides that is sometimes taken to support this. Sometimes that was ideas that go so far as debate about like how do you describe what a person is. I feel like they do the same with what the grander universe is. Well, this is the beginning of, well, it's not the beginning of Greek philosophy. It's the beginning of arguably Greek philosophy as an institution. There were people who were asking these questions before. A few of them. But of course, Plato founded the academy and stuff. So you see this idea branch out. The only group who I would say kind of de facto question this would be the skeptics, but their whole thing was it's impossible to know anything with certainty. So kind of a non-starter there. Yep. So again, we're talking about modeling off the higher living creatures. Is that referring to the God figure, like modeling the universe off the higher living creatures? Is the model here the God himself? Because the God is coming from the higher level. Is that something yet further above? Is that something on the same level? Is it what Aristotle called the intellect? Aristotle never had much patience for the Timaeus, at least not in his later years. I'll give you the full skeptic argument at some point, but not right now. It's not time. Was it talking about what Aristotle called the intellect, his unmoved mover? Is it the one? Is it oneness? But living creature, you're not supposed to give the one predicate, so calling it a living creature is a little bit weird. Like different people have varied to different degrees on what exactly the model living creature here is supposed to be. But they haven't been very... They understood this sort of universe as living creature pretty clearly, and that becomes the idea of the world soul. Or... which is the Stoics adapt into the idea of... predicted the Matrix, those guys were smart. The Matrix is a little bit Platonic, but... the comparison is... the Matrix is also quite Gnostic, so that's interesting. And you will see, it's I don't know if we're gonna get there at this point, but the ways this echoes into Gnostic thinking and the ways in which the Gnostics diverge from it are one of the most interesting things about all this to me. But yes, and this idea of the living universe will be adapted into the Stoic idea of like the universe has this underlying logic. Like some people will say that the creator and the world soul are the same, and the Stoics will say that Well, that's actually kind of referring to this like logical pattern that underpins the universe. That's the closest thing they have to a god, because the Stoics were materialists for their time. And they called that the Logos. And the Logos was then folded into ideas about, like... And the Logos would be sort of folded in with ideas about... I'm trying to pin down the idea, because it's fucking escaping me at this point. The Logos would kind of be folded back into this demiurge figure. I shouldn't have called him demiurge yet, I spoiled that. It'd be folded back into this creator figure. And that figure would then, by a certain Philo of Alexandria, be placed in the context of the Jewish scriptures. And then some people who were a bit aimless after their leader, a guy called Jesus, had died, would then take that whole idea and start using it to try and make sense of what they thought was going on. So that's interesting. I can sort of elaborate on that as we go along, but as we learn more about this creator figure, I can maybe sort of demiurge. I'm surprised you have not heard that term. Oh, that is really neat. But yeah. For since God desired to make it resemble most closely that intelligible creature which is fairest of all and in ways most perfect, he constructed it as a living creature. One invisible, containing with itself all the living creatures which are by nature akin to itself. A little bit of macrocosm, microcosm stuff going on there. The whole universe is reflected in every individual. Big idea there. Although I think it already existed in some capacity. Are we right then in describing the heaven as one? Would it be more correct to speak of the heavens as many or infinite in number? One it must be termed, if it is to be framed after its pattern. For that which embraces all intelligible living creatures could never be second, with another beside it. For if so, there must needs exist yet another living creature which should embrace them both, and of which they two would each be a part. Because they were the most boring thing possible. Compared to those, this is, well, Plato. Yeah, might be wrong about a lot of it too, because like it's all very myth-makey stuff. Like there's a lot of interesting internal myth-making, and the substance of the thing gets lost along the way. That's why I like this idea. I like this let's go back to the roots of ideas thing. I'm a big fan of trying to trace it all back. And if, like I like sort of finding where this stuff goes and trying to follow it along the path, find where new stuff has been added, what's been taken out. And I don't think there's anything wrong with I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with adding and mixing and stuff. I think that's just part of that's just part of how this stuff works. It doesn't even make you wrong necessarily. Like you may stumble upon something that's more true in doing that, but I think you should be honest about it. So okay, if I'm grasping what he's saying here, it's that it's sort of this idea that there must be a highest place in which everything is very singular, which is interesting. And which should embrace them both, and of which the two would each be a part, in which case the universe could no longer be rightly described as modeled on these two, but rather on that third creature which contains them both. Okay. He's lost me a little bit. Just pattern. Okay. I don't know if I agree with the argument. Because I think, it's possible for it to appear as one while being many, theoretically. But I can see the, thing that, stuff that is perfect is in some way sort of unto stuff that is beautiful is in some way sort of unto itself, I suppose. Wherefore, in order... Let me make sure I actually read this. Creature contains them both. Wherefore, in order that the creature might resemble the all-perfect living creature in respect of its uniqueness. Again, the all-perfect living creature, it's unclear if this is our creator figure, or if it's, something different, and that ambiguity is... unless it's resolved later and I've forgotten, that ambiguity is going to lead to some pretty big sort of difference of ideas. Idea of many in one he's posing here. I don't have the full words, but I could talk. I don't really have the words to talk about that. Yeah. In preach respect of its uniqueness. For this reason, its maker made neither two universes nor an infinite number, but there is and will continue to be this one generated heaven, unique of its kind. We have opinions on string theory, apparently. Now that which has come into existence must needs be of bodily form, visible and tangible. Yet without fire, nothing could ever become visible, nor tangible without some solidity, nor solid without earth. So the heavens are a mixture of fire and earth. That's an idea that's brought up here. Four element stuff is interesting because we see it a little bit earlier in the name I'm forgetting, one of the pre-Socratic philosophers. This concept of the four roots, but I don't know if it's actually properly standardized before Plato. I just don't know. I don't have that info. I don't have that info. Shut up, Lenovo. Hence, in beginning to construct the body of the all, God was making it of fire and earth. But it is not possible that two things alone should be conjoined without a third. For there must needs be some intermediary bond to connect the two. And Lenovo, they suck, don't they? They've like the laptop itself has served me fine. I just want to deal with those notifications. In the fairest of bonds is that which most perfectly unites one into both itself and the things which it binds together. And to effect this in the fairest manner is the natural property of proportion. So we're doing we're doing a little bit of weird numerology. We're mixing fire and earth. And we're doing it in different portions. But portion is being treated like a thing unto itself. And again, you can see that maybe there are considered to be forms of qualities. But obviously you wouldn't be mixing a form. That's not how that works. They don't mix, for one thing. They're two sort of unto themselves. But we're doing weird number shit now. Where proportion is this thing that you're adding in some way. Hello, Red. You're coming in late. Because I'm trying to wrap in the next 10 minutes because I want to make sure we can get to the philosophy collab. We're talking about the creation of the universe, mostly. Also, the Twitch chat isn't displaying properly, so your message won't be on there for a bit. Won't be on there right now. Oh man, maybe we'll go a little bit longer, but I want to wrap up in time to get into the philosophy collab, but that's fine. We'll see. Maybe we'll go for extra 5-10 minutes. Just checking in, gave the stream a like, showing support. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I really do. I'm gonna kind of feel out precisely how we're gonna do this. Okay. For how long we're gonna go. Oh. Dogs are mad because dogs are freaking out because mom's home. Okay. For whenever the middle term of any three numbers, cubic or square. Okay, we're getting fucking deep into it. Okay. This might be a good spot to end, if only because I'm realizing now this translation probably just doesn't use the term demiurge, so I want to talk about that. And also we're getting fucking into the math shit. So there's like maybe we should pause here. Because that's going to be a fucking doozy. When we actually dig into it, right? I remember, we were talking about... I'll probably just reread this paragraph when the time comes. Luckily the site, which is pretty cool, it's, again, it's linked in the YouTube description. It does save my place. So next we'll begin. First of all, I'll need to elaborate on the Demiurge because I just realized I'm never gonna get my I'm never gonna get my shoe drop moment with this. It just doesn't use the term, I don't think. And then we've got to talk about math. We've got to talk about weird math. So I'm thinking I'm gonna wrap up here. When you talk about the Demiurge, and then we can do a little review, and then we can dig into weird math. Thanks anyone who stopped by. Seems like a lot of people did come in and out. Again, I'm gonna go right over to another YouTube stream, so I'm not necessarily gonna raid. And look at that.